My name is Elowen Grace Mercer, 22 years old. Mom set Caleb's favorite lasagna on the table like an offering, steam lifting in soft ribbons, the whole kitchen smelling like basil and worship. Dad raised a toast to our boy, to scouts and letters, and bright futures with numbers on jerseys. Caleb grinned, broad-shouldered and golden, the kind of smile that pulled all the light in the room and kept it. I made salad. I poured water. I laughed when they laughed, on a delay, like a foreigner who understood tone better than language. When Mom asked if community college was still the plan, I said yes and pretended not to hear the word still as a sentence, not a question. Caleb's new plaque, Offensive Player of the Year, watched me from the hutch, gleaming. My phone buzzed under the table. Evan. You okay? I can swing by after dinner. I typed with my thumb. I'm fine, just tired. Across town, Betrayal, Evan's ex, and lately my mother's favorite source for gossip, had been running into Mom at spin class, a coincidence that grew teeth. Elowen drinks a lot, you know. She lies when she's scared. Brielle said it in a tone that sounded helpful. Convenient. How helpful can turn cruel when someone else benefits. After dessert, Caleb announced a teammate party. Drive safe, Mom said without looking up from her phone. Always do, he grinned, jangling keys. I cleaned plates. I waited for good nights that came out as, don't be late, which is not the same thing. Evan texted a photo of his dog asleep in a ridiculous sweater. I smiled alone at the sink. At 2:47 a.m., my phone exploded on the nightstand, the sound too loud for the quiet apartment. Dad's name lit the screen like a flare. There's been an accident, he said, voice shredded. Hospital, now. The streets were empty, the kind of empty that makes the world feel tilted. I drove with both hands clutching the wheel like it was the only steady thing left. The ER smelled like antiseptic and fear. Fluorescence hummed. The vending machine refused my crumpled dollar in the exact same stubborn way it had the night Grandma died, and somehow noticing that made everything worse. I found them by the large window. Mom's shoulders shook. Dad's jaw was locked so tight it seemed carved. Where is he? I asked. Where's Caleb? In surgery, Dad said. And then the knife. And this is your fault. I blinked. What? You were supposed to be his designated driver. Mom's voice didn't crack. It froze. He called you. You ignored him. No, he didn't. I fumbled for my phone, thumb already scrolling, hands shaking just enough to miss. There's nothing here. No call from Caleb, no missed call, no voicemail. Don't lie, Dad hissed. He told us he called his big sister for help and you hung up. Said you were too busy with your loser friends to be there for family. I held the screen up. Look, check the log. The texts. There's nothing. Dad glanced, just long enough to say he'd complied, not long enough to see. You probably deleted it. Mom leaned away from me, the tiniest flinch. You smell like alcohol. I had half a beer at 10 o'clock, I said, heat rising. With dinner, with water. I'm not drunk, Mom. Brielle's voice echoed in my head. When she's scared, she lies. And I watched the rumor attach itself to my mother's grief like a barnacle. It didn't matter that Evan offered, night after night, to be my driver if I ever needed it. In this story, my boyfriend's devotion didn't fit the plot. The ex's whisper did. A surgeon stepped into the waiting room, face cratered with fatigue. Your son is stable. He'll recover. But there are charges. DUI, reckless endangerment. Her mouth flattened. The other driver didn't make it. The floor shifted. I grabbed the edge of a chair that wasn't mine and held on. What have you done? Mom whispered, but she wasn't talking to Caleb. I felt my phone buzz again. Evan. I'm outside. Do you want me to come in? I could see his reflection in the automatic doors. Hood up, hands jammed in pockets. Every ounce of him ready to be useful, to be shelter. I typed, no, not yet. There are moments you learn the size of your loneliness, and there are other moments you choose it because it's cleaner than the version offered. Dad stood, shoulders squared in a verdict. You abandoned him, he said. You forced him to drive drunk. A woman is dead because you couldn't be bothered to pick up your phone. I didn't get a call. My voice shook and then steadied. He never called me. He doesn't call me. Not for rides, not for anything. You always make it about you, Mom said, eyes bright with something that looked like relief disguised as rage. Relief, because blame is a raft even if it's the wrong ocean. Through the glass, I watched the automatic doors open and close, as if the building itself were breathing. A nurse walked by, carrying a stack of warm blankets like she was holding a newborn. Somewhere down a hall, someone laughed too loudly and then apologetically, and I hated them for their joy and envied them for their momentary escape. Evan texted again. "If you need me, say now. I'll come in. I'm here." I typed, then erased, then typed. "Just wait a little longer." Dad's phone rang. He stepped away, murmured. Mom's fingers fluttered over her purse and then stilled. She turned to me, chin raised. "If you cared, you would have answered." "If you cared," I said softly, "you would look at my phone." The elevator dinged. The surgeon returned with a clipboard and a list of pretrial protocols none of us heard. She said the victim's name, Margaret Chen, and the syllables felt like a bell tolling through my ribs. We sat, a family halved by a line no one wanted to step across. On one side, a golden boy on a table under lights. On the other, the daughter who had learned to hold her breath at dinner so she wouldn't inhale disappointment. When dawn bled into the waiting room through glass that made the world look flatter than it was, Dad handed me a trash bag with my name written on masking tape, as if that could make it delicate. "Pack your things," he said without looking at me. "We can't look at you." I stared at the bag, at his hands, at the way Mom's eyes skated past me to the coffee machine, to anywhere else. A woman was dead, my brother was alive, and my parents had chosen their story. My phone buzzed one more time. "Evan, now?" I typed, "Now." Outside, the sky brightened like it had survived something. I stepped through the automatic doors, and they shut behind me with a hush that sounded like a secret keeping itself. 3 days after the surgery, Dad didn't meet my eyes when he handed me garbage bags. Masking tape labels in his tight block letters made my name look like a warning. "We can't look at you," he said, as if grief granted him a badge and a gun. Mom stood at the doorway, arms crossed, gaze sliding off me like light on water. She didn't ask where I'd go. She didn't say, "Be safe." I packed fast. 2 pairs of jeans, a handful of t-shirts, the few books I'd bought with tip money, a box of small things people call keepsakes when they think they'll keep you. Evan waited at the curb with the van he'd borrowed from his coworker, engine running, jaw tight. He didn't ask me to explain. He loaded bags like we were late for something important and said, "Belt," before he pulled away. I buckled without arguing. The house shrank in the mirror. We drove without music. The town, so proud of its fading brick and summer festivals, had already begun whispering. I could feel it against the windows, the shape of my name changing as it passed. The local paper posted an article that afternoon, promising athlete's life derailed by family tragedy, with a photo of Caleb smiling beside the mayor at a charity banquet. The headline sat on my phone like a dare. The comments did their work. Where was the big sister? These kids need better role models. Prayers. Evan's friend rented us a basement apartment that smelled like dust and the history of someone else's arguments. Cement floor, one narrow window, a futon. Evan opened his mouth. "I can stay," and closed it when I shook my head. "Come back tomorrow with food," I said, "and a real pillow." He nodded like he'd been given orders he knew how to carry out. My first night alone, I stared at my phone until my eyes burned. The call log was proof, clean and void, a silent ledger of what hadn't happened. No call from Caleb at 2:31 a.m. or any other time. No missed call badge to open. No voicemail to mishear. I photographed the screens and uploaded them to a new cloud folder I named with something boring, Budget Receipts 2019, because boring stays invisible longer. Brielle posted a black and white Instagram story. "Pray for him. Some people are so selfish when family needs them." A heart emoji bled across the screen. I watched the tiny dots of my mother's account view it, then tap a heart. There are knives that look like sympathy. Work became survival math. I picked up extra shifts at the gas station, burned my hands on coffee pots, memorized the faces of the regulars who tipped in nickels and advice. At night, I lay awake cataloging moments I could have done differently, because self-harm doesn't always need a blade. Evan came by with a pillow, a lamp, a cheap rug that made the floor less like a sentence. He held me while I didn't cry. "When you're ready to breathe," he said into my hair, "I'll still be here." I believed him. I kept that belief to myself like a warm stone. On the fourth day, the doorbell of the basement buzzed. I opened it to find Caleb on the steps, sunglasses on, though we were in the shade, baseball cap low. He looked clean and hollow, like a room that had just been painted. He slipped inside and closed the door with exaggerated care, as if quiet could make anything truer. "We should talk," he said, scanning the ceiling like there were cameras. "They're pulling my phone records. It's not good." "I know," I said. He took off the sunglasses. His eyes were red and restless. "You have to help me, Elle. Just say I called you. Say you didn't hear it. People miss calls all the time." He tried a lighter tone that didn't fit anymore. "We can make it simple." I looked at him, my little brother who used to follow me down sidewalks, matching his steps to mine. The golden boy who had learned the exact weight of our parents' love and how to bend beneath it without breaking. "I'm not going to lie under oath." He rubbed his jaw, impatience breaking through. "I'll make it worth it. 10,000. Dad will give you your job back at the store. We'll fix your reputation." He said reputation like it was a shirt I'd stained on purpose. I took a breath that reached all the way down. "You drove drunk," I said quietly. "A woman died." He flinched, then hardened. "It was an accident." "And the nights before that, and the month before that, you kept choosing it." He stared at me for a long beat. Then, softly, "If you don't help me, I'll tell everyone you were driving. That we switched at the hospital. They'll believe me." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. I had expected it. I still felt something in me step back from him in a way that didn't feel reversible. I held up my phone. The screen recording app's red dot glowed calmly from the corner. His eyes flicked to it, then back to me, then away. For a second, I watched all the calculations happen in his face, the way he'd always been fast at math. "Get out," I said. He shifted his weight like he might try charm as a last resort, then abandoned it. "You'll regret this." He left his thread on the rug, like dirt from his shoes. I sat down on the futon and replayed the audio twice. Then I uploaded it to Budget Receipts 2019 and a second drive with an uglier name, Wi-Fi Printer Drivers. Because if you've ever lived with someone who lies, you learn to hide truth in plain sight. After that, I opened a different folder, Videos Archive, where I'd kept clips from the last year. Caleb slurring about being a drunk driving champion. Caleb refusing my keys with a laugh that sounded like daredevilry dressed up as confidence. Caleb peeling out from that party 2 weeks before the crash. I added timestamps, addresses, who else had been there. I wrote a list of names of people I'd seen try to stop him, people my parents ignored. A number I didn't know called me the next afternoon. "Ms. Mercer, this is ADA Lorraine King from the District Attorney's Office." Her voice was steady, tired around the edges, like good shoes at the end of a long day. "I'd like to speak with you about the night of the crash and your brother's pattern of behavior leading up to it." I looked at the folders open on my laptop. Evidence felt less like vengeance than oxygen. "Okay," I said. "When?" We met in a small office with 2 chairs and a plant doing its best under fluorescent lights. I brought a flash drive. I brought my phone. I brought a notebook with dates. I brought the part of me that had been told for years that love equals silence and laid it on the table to see if it would live without me. King didn't rush. She asked careful questions that didn't try to trick me into anything I couldn't carry. When I slid the drive across the desk, her hands didn't shake, but I saw her exhale like she'd been waiting to see if I would jump. "Why did you start recording?" she asked gently. "Because I knew one day I'd need to prove the truth," I said, "and because no one in my house wanted to hear it." We met 3 more times. She took copies, then backups of backups. She explained subpoenas and chain of custody and what it means to tell a story that holds in court. She didn't promise outcomes. She did promise to treat me like a person, not a prop. I told Evan afterward in the parking lot, under a sky that looked like it had rained angry and then given up. He listened without interrupting. He said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I might have emailed the tip line with your name the day you got kicked out. Anonymous," he added quickly. "You didn't owe me that," I said, and kissed his stupid, good, terrified mouth. Meanwhile, Brielle kept busy. She sidled up to my mother at church, at the pharmacy, at the farmer's market, each time with a new rumor. She could hand over like a tissue. Eloin's seeing older men for money. Eloin's drinking every night. Eloin hates Caleb and always has. Useful stories, if your heart needs excuses to keep beating in the wrong direction. 6 months later, a court summons arrived with my name spelled correctly in a serif font that looked expensive. The state wanted me to testify. My parents texted me a thumbs up emoji and a heart, assuming I'd be there for family. I didn't correct them. Some cliffs you let people walk off on their own. The morning of the trial, I sat in the driver's seat outside the courthouse, the building's stone face pretending neutrality. Mom and Dad walked up the steps with Caleb between them in a suit he didn't know how to stand in. Their lawyer spoke into his ear like a coach calling plays. They looked confident, practiced. They had the story they wanted and the audience they thought they deserved. They didn't know I'd been meeting the prosecutor for weeks. I turned off the engine, pressed my palms flat on my thighs, and counted my breaths. When I opened the door, the air felt colder. I walked toward the entrance and didn't look back. The courthouse was colder than I expected. The marble floor echoed too easily, every heel strike sounding like a gavel. I stood near the back, clutching my folder, watching my family settle near the front. Mom wore navy, her serious and respectable color. Dad kept a hand on Caleb's shoulder like he was steadying him, though the truth was, Caleb had always been the steady one in their eyes. He looked confident again, polished. The kind of confidence that only comes from knowing everyone in the room has been told your side first. He turned once and saw me. For a second, surprise cracked through the composure. Then it was gone. He leaned toward Mom, said something. She turned, spotted me, and smiled like we were about to take a family photo. I didn't smile back. When the bailiff called the room to order, the lawyer, Caleb's lawyer, walked like a man with a winning script. He painted my brother as the picture of promise, the hard-working student-athlete, the young man derailed by tragedy and guilt. A victim, he said, of circumstance and poor guidance. My chest burned at those words. Poor guidance. I was the guidance he meant. The prosecutor, ADA Lorraine King, stood next, her calm sharp enough to cut glass. The state calls Elowen Grace Mercer to the stand. I heard my mother's soft gasp before the sound fully reached the room. Dad went rigid beside her, his jaw locked in disbelief. Caleb turned slowly in his seat, his smirk gone now, his face blank but pale. I walked to the witness box. My heartbeat felt like it belonged to someone else, loud enough to fill the air. The clerk held out the Bible. I placed my hand on it and swore. Please state your relationship to the defendant, Lorraine said. I'm his older sister. And were you present the night of the accident? No, I said. I was home. The defense relaxed visibly, thinking this was their safe zone. Did the defendant contact you that night requesting a ride? I looked directly at Caleb. He didn't blink. No, I said clearly. He did not. The ripple across the courtroom felt almost physical, like the collective air shifted. The prosecutor nodded once. To your knowledge, Ms. Mercer, has your brother ever asked you to be his designated driver before? Never, not once. Dad's head began to shake, his mouth moving, no sound. Mom was crying already. Lorraine kept her tone even. Ms. Mercer, can you describe your brother's drinking habits? I opened my folder. He's been drinking heavily since he was 16. He keeps a flask in his car. He drinks before practice, after practice, sometimes before school. He's driven under the influence more times than I can count. Objection, Caleb's lawyer barked, his voice breaking the tension. Speculation and hearsay. Lorraine turned to the judge. Your Honor, I'll rephrase. Then, looking back at me, have you personally witnessed the defendant drinking and driving? Yes, I said, and I have proof. I lifted my phone. The bailiff took it and connected it to the monitor. The first video filled the screen. Caleb at a backyard party 3 months before the accident, beer in hand, his speech already slurred. He was laughing. I'm like the drunk driving champion, he bragged. Never been caught. A muffled gasp spread through the gallery. The camera shifted. You could hear my voice behind it, sharp and worried. Caleb, stop. This isn't funny. His friend's laughter filled the background. The second video played. Caleb stumbling toward his car 2 weeks before the crash, fumbling his keys. You're wasted, my voice said again, shaking now. Let me drive. Get lost, Elle. I got this. I always got this. Then the sound of tires screeching as he sped off. The courtroom was silent. The only sound came from the victim's husband in the front row, a choked sob that cut through the air. His daughter sat beside him, her small hand clutching his sleeve. Lorraine let the silence hold. Then she turned back to me. Ms. Mercer, why did you start recording these videos? Because I knew one day I'd have to prove it, I said. Because when I tried to tell my parents, they said I was jealous. When I showed them similar videos last year, they accused me of sabotage. Lorraine nodded slowly. And after the accident? They said Caleb had called me that night asking for a ride, that I ignored him. They kicked me out 3 days later. She paused. Did your brother, in fact, call you? No. She lifted a folder. Your Honor, the state would like to submit verified phone records from the defendant's carrier, confirming that no call was placed to Ms. Mercer's number the night of the crash. Caleb's lawyer shot to his feet, whispering furiously to him. Caleb's jaw clenched. Lorraine continued. However, these records show calls to multiple teammates, a pizza place, his drug dealer, and finally, his girlfriend at the time, Ms. Brielle Voss, at 2:31 a.m. At the sound of Brielle's name, Mom's head snapped up. The whispering began again. Lorraine's voice stayed steady. At no point did the defendant attempt to contact his sister. She turned to me. Ms. Mercer, did you speak with your brother after the accident? Yes. What was said? I took a breath. He came to where I was staying. He asked me to lie. He offered money. He said if I didn't, he'd tell everyone I was driving that night. He threatened to destroy me. A murmur ran through the court. Did you record this conversation? Yes. I handed over another device. The bailiff played the audio through the speakers. Elowen, please, just say I called you, say you missed it, 10 grand. I'll fix everything. I'm not lying, Caleb. So what? She's dead. It was an accident. Are you threatening to frame me for killing someone? A choice, Elle. Help me or I'll ruin you. The recording ended. The silence afterward was so thick it hummed. Caleb sat very still, his knuckles white. Mom's sobs turned to dry, stunned noises. Dad looked at his son like he'd never seen him before. The judge's gavel struck twice. Order. Lorraine nodded to the bailiff. Please collect the evidence for the record. Then, to me, Ms. Mercer, after this conversation, what did you do? I went to the police, I said. I gave them everything. Why not sooner? I swallowed. Because despite everything, he was still my brother. I thought if I kept giving him chances, maybe he'd stop. Maybe he'd grow up before someone got hurt. And now? I looked at Caleb. His eyes darted away. Now someone's dead, and I don't get to believe in maybe anymore. Lorraine turned to the jury. No further questions. As I stepped down, my knees shook, but my spine stayed straight. The air felt cleaner, even in that suffocating room. I passed my parents without looking at them, though I could feel their eyes clinging, begging for a story that didn't exist anymore. During recess, they found me in the hallway. Mom's makeup had streaked, her hands trembling. Elowen, she whispered. What did you just do? What I should have done a year ago, I said. Dad's voice was hoarse. You destroyed your brother. No, I said quietly. He destroyed himself. I just stopped cleaning up after him. For once, they didn't have an answer. Through the glass doors at the end of the hall, I saw Evan waiting outside, arms folded, the same patience on his face that had kept me alive all these months. When I walked toward him, he didn't ask how it went. He just opened his arms, and I let the noise fall away long enough to breathe. Tomorrow would be worse. Tomorrow Caleb would take the stand. But for now, I'd spoken the truth, and the first cut had finally landed where it belonged. The next morning, the courthouse looked different. Not because it had changed, but because they had. The reporters outside no longer smiled at my family when we walked through the doors. Their cameras shifted toward me instead, lenses glinting like judgment. Inside, Mom avoided my eyes. Dad had aged overnight, his hair visibly grayer under the fluorescent lights. Caleb didn't look at anyone. He sat forward at the defense table, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the polished wood ahead of him. His lawyer kept whispering, but Caleb wasn't listening. The day's proceedings began with the witnesses the prosecutor had lined up. One by one, people took the stand, each voice chipping away at the image of perfection my parents had protected for years. Caleb's high school guidance counselor testified first. She said she'd called home 3 times to report smelling alcohol on him during class. Each time, she said, glancing at my parents, Mrs. Mercer assured me she'd handle it privately. After the 3rd call, Caleb was transferred to a different school. Then came our neighbor, Mrs. McCall, who lived 2 houses down. She spoke quietly, her hands shaking. I called the police once, she said, after seeing Caleb weave down the street late at night. The next morning, Mr. Mercer showed up at my door, told me if I made another call, he'd sue me for harassment. I watched my father's head drop. He didn't look up again for the rest of her testimony. A family friend followed, a man named Peter, who used to come over for barbecues every summer. 2 Christmases ago, he said, I saw Caleb stumble out to his car after your family party. I told Mr. Mercer immediately. He told me to mind my own business and not ruin a good boy's future. Lorraine let the silence speak for itself before moving on. Finally, she brought me back to the stand. Elowen, she began, yesterday you testified that your brother threatened to frame you if you didn't lie. Can you tell the jury what happened after that conversation? I went to the police, I said, and I gave them this. I handed over a small black flash drive. Lorraine nodded to the bailiff, who plugged it into the courtroom monitor. The screen flickered, then filled with sound. The conversation I'd recorded in my basement. Caleb's voice, unmistakably clear. Just say I called you, just once. That's all you have to do. My voice shaking, I won't lie. Then Caleb again, harsher now. If you don't, I'll tell everyone you were driving. I'll ruin you. The courtroom was dead quiet. Every word landed like a hammer. Lorraine turned toward the jury. You've heard the defendant's own words. Words of manipulation, not remorse. Now you'll hear the rest. She brought up the phone records next. Pages of official documents, each line stamped and verified. These are the defendant's calls the night of the crash, she said. 3 to his teammates, 1 to a pizza shop, 1 to his drug supplier, and finally 1 to his girlfriend at the time, Ms. Brielle Voss. Not a single attempt to contact his sister. The defense lawyer stood abruptly. Objection, relevance. Overruled, the judge said without hesitation. Lorraine's tone sharpened. The lie that he called Elowen Mercer wasn't just to save face. It was the foundation of a smear campaign that destroyed her reputation, cost her a home, and allowed him to hide behind a narrative of victimhood. She turned to the jury again. That lie was deliberate. When she was done, Caleb's lawyer called him to the stand. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until I heard the shuffle of Caleb's shoes as he walked past me. He looked smaller than I remembered. The confident, cocky smile that had always carried him was gone. Mr. Mercer, the lawyer began, you've admitted to drinking the night of the accident. You've also expressed remorse. Can you tell the jury what happened? Caleb leaned into the microphone. I made a mistake, he said quietly. I'd been struggling with drinking for a long time. Lorraine rose immediately. Struggling? She repeated. Mr. Mercer, when did this alleged struggle begin? Senior year, he said, hesitating. In 4 years of struggling, how many times did you seek treatment? He blinked. I didn't think I needed it. So you were aware you had a problem, but you did nothing to stop it. Objection, badgering, his lawyer tried, but the judge waved it off. Lorraine stepped closer. Did you ever attend AA meetings? No. Therapy? No. Did you ever ask your parents for help? No. But you did ask your sister to lie for you? He froze. Yes. Did you offer her money? Yes. Did you threaten to frame her if she refused? His voice dropped to a whisper. Yes. The jury shifted in their seats. Someone in the gallery gasped. Lorraine nodded slowly. So you're admitting that, even after killing someone while driving drunk, your first instinct was not to tell the truth, but to manipulate your sister? He swallowed. I was scared. That's not an answer. I didn't want to lose everything, he said finally, almost pleading. Lorraine's expression hardened. You mean your scholarship, your image, the things you valued more than a woman's life. He looked down. Yes. For the first time since this began, Caleb's voice broke. I never meant to hurt anyone. Lorraine didn't let him off the hook. And yet you did. Repeatedly. You hurt your sister, your parents, and most of all, you ended Margaret Chen's life. Do you even know the name of her children? He shook his head. No. Then you should learn it, she said, because that's who you owe your future to. By the time she stepped away, Caleb was trembling. His lawyer tried to recover, asking a few soft questions about addiction and pressure, but the damage was done. When the jury filed out to deliberate, I sat in the front row beside Lorraine, my hands clasped so tightly they ached. The clock on the wall ticked loud enough to count every heartbeat. 3 hours later, the bailiff announced the verdict. On the charge of vehicular manslaughter, guilty. On the charge of reckless endangerment, guilty. On the charge of witness intimidation, guilty. The room erupted. Reporters whispered into their phones. The victim's husband bowed his head, tears streaming silently. My mother sobbed into Dad's chest. Caleb didn't move. As the judge thanked the jury and began reading sentencing dates, I realized something simple and terrifying. Justice doesn't feel like victory. It feels like exhaustion wearing honesty's face. When we walked outside, the flashbulbs blinded me. Evan was waiting by the steps, holding out his hand. I took it without thinking. Somewhere behind me, Brielle slipped through the crowd, ducking her head when the cameras turned her way. She'd built half the lies that nearly buried me. But now, no one was interested in her whispers anymore. Lorraine's voice echoed from behind. "You did it, Elowen." I shook my head. No, the truth did. The wind carried the sound of traffic and sirens and 100 people talking at once. But under all that noise, for the first time in years, I heard something quieter, something steady. The sound of my own breathing, free, unashamed, and finally real. The sentencing hearing was held 4 weeks later, but it felt like years had passed. The courtroom was smaller this time, quieter, stripped of the media frenzy that had turned the trial into a spectacle. Only the people who couldn't look away were there, the ones whose lives had been shattered by someone else's choices. Caleb sat in his suit again, but this time there was no arrogance left in him. He looked hollow, older somehow. Mom clutched a tissue in one hand, Dad's arm in the other. They didn't talk to me when I entered. They didn't have to. The distance between us was already a living thing. Lorraine nodded for me to take my place at the witness podium. The judge asked if I had a statement to make. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the paper, the one I'd rewritten 5 times the night before. "Your Honor," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. My brother had every opportunity to make different choices. He came from a family that loved him, parents who worshipped him, and a sister who begged him to stop before he hurt someone. He wasn't struggling with addiction. He was choosing recklessness. He was choosing to believe he was untouchable. Caleb's eyes flicked up for a second, but I kept reading. "A woman is dead because of those choices. Margaret Chen deserved better than to die 3 blocks from her home. Her children deserved better than to grow up without their mother. Her husband deserved better than to bury the person he loved because someone else thought consequences were optional." My parents spent years enabling the illusion that Caleb was perfect. They mistook protection for love, and in doing so, they destroyed us all. I spent years trying to save him, but I wasn't brave enough to do what I did until it was too late. That's on me. I'll live with that forever. The courtroom stayed silent. Even the judge had stopped taking notes. My brother will serve time, but I hope he learns that prison isn't the punishment. It's the mirror. He'll have to live with what he sees in it every day, and I hope my parents learn that denial is also a kind of violence. Pretending not to see is what got us here. I folded the paper. That's all. When I stepped back, I caught the faintest sound of sobbing, not from my mother, but from Margaret Chen's husband, seated in the second row. He met my gaze, his eyes raw but kind. The judge cleared his throat. "Mr. Mercer, the court sentences you to 15 years in state prison for vehicular manslaughter, with the possibility of parole after 10 and 5 additional years for witness intimidation. I hope you use that time to confront the damage you've caused, not just to strangers, but to your own family." The gavel struck once, final and echoing. Caleb didn't look at me as they led him out, but he did look at Mom. She nodded through tears, whispering something I couldn't hear. When the room emptied, I stayed behind. Lorraine touched my shoulder. "You did everything right," she said softly. "Then why does it feel like losing?" I asked. "Because the truth always costs more than you think." Outside, the winter wind cut across the courthouse steps. Evan was waiting, hands stuffed in his coat pockets, a takeout coffee in one hand for me. I took it, the warmth grounding me. "It's over," I said quietly. He studied my face. "No," he said, "it's different. Not over. Healing doesn't mean you get to forget." He was right. 2 weeks later, my parents asked to meet. Against every instinct, I agreed. We sat in a cafe downtown. Mom wore black again, but not for mourning. She always thought dark colors made apologies look more serious. Dad's hands trembled around his cup. "Elowen," Mom started, her voice breaking. "We're sorry. We were wrong." "You blamed me for something I tried to stop," I said flatly. Dad looked down. "We wanted to believe Caleb. It was easier." "Easier than believing me?" Silence. Mom reached across the table, but I didn't move. "Please," she whispered, "can we fix this?" I thought of Margaret Chen's children, the way her husband's voice cracked when he spoke at sentencing. "You can't fix this," I said. "You can learn from it. That's different." Mom's eyes filled again. "We'll do anything." "Then start with accountability," I said. "Stop trying to make this about family healing. Make it about her. Volunteer. Talk to high schools. Tell them what denial costs." Dad nodded slowly. "We will." "Good," I said, standing. "Then maybe, someday, we'll have something to talk about again." Evan drove me home. He didn't fill the silence with comfort. He just kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly on my knee, steadying me in the quiet. That night, I wrote in my journal for the first time in months. Justice isn't peace. It's just the truth finally catching up. Weeks turned into months. The media stories faded. The whispers quieted. I found a part-time job helping teens write college essays, most of them kids who thought their stories didn't matter. I told them the same thing Lorraine had once told me. The truth always costs something, but it's the only thing that survives. Sometimes, late at night, I replayed Caleb's last look at me in court, part guilt, part relief. He knew I'd done what he couldn't. I'd told the truth. And no matter how broken everything felt, I'd finally stopped apologizing for that. 3 years later, Portland didn't feel like an escape anymore. It felt like oxygen. My apartment was small, warm, full of secondhand furniture and quiet mornings. The world outside still buzzed with stories louder than mine, and I was okay with that. I worked as a counselor for at-risk youth, mostly kids who carried the same invisible weight I used to, guilt that didn't belong to them, loyalty that hurt more than it healed. Every time one of them asked, "What if telling the truth makes everyone hate me?" I told them what Lorraine once told me. Telling the truth doesn't make you bad. It makes you free. Evan was still here, steady as ever. He never tried to rescue me. He just stayed, patient and real. We didn't talk about marriage or timelines. We just built peace, brick by brick, like two people who had finally stopped mistaking chaos for love. One crisp afternoon in October, a letter arrived with handwriting I recognized instantly. My mother's. The postmark read, Salem. I sat at the table for a long time before opening it. Elowen, your father and I have started volunteering at the free clinic where Margaret Chen used to work. It began as community service through our church, but we stayed. We read to children in the waiting room. We drive patients home who don't have rides. We've been doing this quietly for 2 years now. We also started a nonprofit focused on family intervention, helping parents see the warning signs before they start defending the wrong things. We tell our story, all of it. We use Caleb's name and we use yours. Not to erase what happened, but to make sure it doesn't happen again. We don't expect forgiveness. We just hope that someday, when you think of us, you won't only remember the worst parts. We are trying to earn peace, not borrow it. Love, Mom. A folded newspaper clipping fell out. It showed my parents standing beside a new trauma center named the Margaret Chen Memorial Wing. Dad's smile was small but real. Mom looked like a woman still learning how to hold both grief and purpose at once. I didn't cry. I just sat there, quiet, the letter open in my lap. 6 months later, another envelope came, this one from Caleb. The handwriting was neat, the sentences careful. L. I've been sober for 3 years. I got my GED. I'm taking college courses through a prison program, psychology, mostly. I lead AA meetings every Wednesday. I don't expect you to answer. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just need you to know that I finally understand what you were trying to tell me. I wasn't a victim. I was selfish. Every time I drank and drove, I chose to gamble with other people's lives. I used Mom and Dad's love like armor, and I used your silence like permission. You tried to stop me, and I punished you for it. Margaret Chen's family deserves every breath I have left to go toward making something good out of what I destroyed. I write letters to them I'll never send, but it helps me remember she was real, not just a name in a headline. I don't want freedom if I don't deserve it, but I want to keep trying to become someone she might forgive, even if you never do. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it and placed it beside Mom's. 2 months later, my phone rang. The number wasn't one I knew. Ms. Mercer, a man's voice asked. This is David Chen, Margaret's husband. My throat tightened. Yes. I hope I'm not intruding, he said gently. Your parents reached out through the Victims Assistance Program. They asked how they could honor my wife's memory. What did you tell them? I told them Margaret always believed redemption wasn't about words, it was about service. So I told them about the programs she supported, the free clinic, the family safety initiative. They've been volunteering there for 2 years now. No press, no speeches. They just show up, every week. I didn't know what to say. He paused. Margaret would have liked that, he said softly. After he hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. I thought about accountability, how it isn't an apology or a plea, but a posture, something you keep showing up for even when no one's watching. I took out both letters and reread them. For the first time, I didn't feel anger pressing against my ribs, just the ache of something softer, something beginning. That night, I wrote one of my own. Mom, Dad, I heard about your work at the clinic. Margaret's husband told me you've been showing up there for years, quietly. If that's true, then maybe we can start having a conversation again. Not about forgiveness, but about what family actually means. For now, that's enough. I sealed the envelope and walked it to the mailbox at the corner of my street. The night air smelled like rain. A streetlight flickered overhead, painting everything in gold. My phone buzzed before I turned back. It was one of the kids I counseled. 16, scared, caught between fear and truth. He crashed the car again. Mom wants me to lie. What do I do? I stared at the message, feeling the old weight rise. The same choice, a new generation. I typed back, "You tell the truth, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Meet me at the office in an hour, and we'll figure out how to keep you safe." I slid the phone into my pocket and started walking home, past the quiet windows, past lives still trying to learn better. Because some family traditions needed to end, because some cycles were meant to break. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to lie for them, even when they beg you to, even when it costs you everything, even when everyone else calls you the villain. I glanced once at the dark sky, where the city lights drowned out the stars, but not the promise of them. Then I whispered to the silence, not for Caleb or my parents or even Margaret, but for the girl I used to be. I told the truth, and for the first time, that felt like love.